Thank you, Andrew, for being here with us today. We're excited to spend some time with you.
Thanks for having me so much. Yeah, delighted to be here.
What's the most important first step to take when you want to accelerate your career?
I think for me, it's identifying what your weaknesses are and owning those. And it's not that you have to go and improve those weaknesses. It's just really powerful to know what you're not good at so that you can focus your energy on what you are good at.
I like that identification piece of it. Name one habit that every ambitious young professional should adapt.
I think it's curiosity and never stop learning. I think the more I've learned, the more I realize I don't know. But that's okay. And I think it's just making sure that you have that that behavior that to never stop learning.
It always starts from a very young age, right? We get pounded to read. If you read, you succeed. And then over time, people tend to fall away from that. But I think now with a lot of video content, it's easier to do continuous learning for the majority of folks.
Yeah, and maybe just to add to that then, I think beyond your screen is probably what I mean, is like get out into the world and get experiences to learn. So try and say yes to every travel opportunity, because every time you get some more input into your brain, you're going to give you the best chance of creativity. So you get that by pushing yourself out of your comfort zone, and that sort of, that behavior of learning, but learning not in the only place you've grown up.
Thank you for elaborating on that. And then what's the biggest networking mistake to avoid early in your career?
Biggest networking mistake would be to not network. I think you have to learn to get out there. You have to learn how to speak to people. You have to learn how to talk and tell your story. So I would advise people get out as early as possible and just remove the word networking. You're just hanging out with human beings, and people say networking is cringe and it's this and it's that. Stop calling it networking and realizing it's talking to human beings. And the better you get at doing that, the better chance you have of meeting people, new experiences happening, and your opportunities opening up for you.
Yeah, that's very spot on, because the networking piece of it makes it seem very transactional almost, right? Like I have to get something from this, versus like you highlighted it. Just tell your story, and that will intrigue others, and then it will just continue the conversation. Just in that same line, though, how can young folks go about getting used to telling their story? Should they write it out? Should they practice it in the mirror? Like, how can they get confident with that?
Yeah, so I remember it. I remember 100 years ago when I was young, thinking, I don't have a story, and what the hell is my story? And you see people and you follow and you go, wow, they've got it all figured out. And I felt exactly like that, but I've got some really practical ways that can help do it. And first of all, one of those is that your story can start wherever you want. So your story might start today. So if someone's listening to this, they might say, my story started when I listened to this podcast with Wade and Andrew. I heard this thing and it set me off on this journey. And I went and did this, did that. I now have X, Y, Z, and I have a company, or whatever what it turns into. Or your story could start at birth. It could be, this is the situation I came into the world in, and that taught me these things, and it sent me off on this trajectory. It could be when you ended your school career. It could be a moment in time. It could be the pandemic, right? So it's remembering it doesn't have to be everything, and you can pick out the highlights that tell a good story. There's a great tool, and it's on a website, and I'm just trying to remember it. It's called Wait But Why, and it's a really powerful tool, right? You print off one sheet of paper, and it's got 52 little square boxes in a line, right? And they represent the weeks of the year, and then it repeats those 52 boxes 90 times on one page, right? So if you imagine you've got a grid with 52 times 90, and it's basically your life, right? And if you print that piece of paper off, you can attack it however you like. You can put crosses on, this is where I was born, you can move into the future, and you can say, I want to be this or that, I want to have a house like this, and you can plan. But it's a really, really powerful tool to go, what the hell is my story? And if you just get a glass of wine, sit on a Friday night, you and your partner, you and your friends, print this thing off, map some stuff out, and everyone will attack it a different way, and then maybe play it back to someone, and you go, that's the piece of the story that you need to concentrate on. but it gives you real clarity. And I did that years ago, and that was one thing that really helped me.
Wow. Thank you so much for going into that. That's very impactful, but I think it's a pieces that people can actually go out and do, right? It's very actionable. So I like that. I think it's a lot of people are visual learners these days. So I think it's great to kind of have that element to kind of curate that story. And then how do you handle criticism in a way that fuels growth instead of discouragement?
Yeah, it's a good question, isn't it? Criticism is always a really hard thing for anyone to take, and anyone that tells you otherwise, they're lying to you. But I think it's one of these things, right? And it comes in different ways in our life, right? It might come in a work setting, it might come in a high school student setting, wherever you are, or it might come in a trolling session, right, on the internet, right? You put stuff out there, and we've all got this kind of negativity bias, right, where people probably say great things to us all the time, but we ignore those and we concentrate on the one thing that someone said was negative, right? And that's just human nature. And I think the best advice I could probably give here is that you need to try and sort of detach your ego from it and understand, well, is it actually something that I need to be paying attention to? Is it something I need to learn from? And if it's not, just let it drift past. And it's easier said than done, but the better that you can get at just kind of understanding if it's something you do need to think about and adapt and change. And again, another really good way of trying to understand your brain. And I always talk about, we have superpowers and we have kryptonite, right? And it's where we started today, is like we've stuff we're great at, and like a superhero, we've got kryptonite, like Superman, that's not good for us. And you'll come across these personality tests, these insight tests, where they tell you if you're a color, like a different color, right? And to give you a sort of insight into that, you've got kind of red characteristics, which are people that are action orientated. They get shit done, but the weakness of that is, to other people, they might feel quite overwhelming, right? You get yellow people, and that personality is very creative, visionary, can tell stories, can bring people on a journey, but they might come across negatively to others as chaotic and, these types of things. You've got green people, they call amiable, and they're people, and they like to make sure everyone's on a journey, but they could be perceived as slowing everything down because they're waiting to get everyone in line. And then you've got blue characteristics, which are kind of analytical people. They like the detail. They like to know everything before we get going. And they could be perceived as being, again, slow or too detail orientated and not selling a vision and so forth. And when you start to realize that we've all got a couple of these that are dominant and a couple of them that sit behind the scenes, it's good to do these exercises, and usually this kind of stuff costs a lot of money, but you can type in you can type this into ChatGPT and say, hey, give me a color insights profile. I want you to ask as many questions as you need to ask me to understand what my personality is like, where my strengths are, where my weaknesses are, where my blind spots might be. And then I want you to reveal that to me and tell me how I should work and what kind of people I ready to surround myself to. And you can do that now for free. And I think that's another hopefully actionable thing that lets you go, oh, that's what I'm like. And then you can understand, how to use your weakness. And I can't even remember your question now, but hopefully that somewhere answers it.
I think that's very exciting because it levels the playing field, right? There's some folks that might not be able to, but you could go into ChatGPT, give it, you don't even have to have the paying platform for like $20 a month, right? You can just use the free one and pull it up, and then you can get ahead of the curve like everyone else and stay up with the competition.
Yeah, and I think the point is, and a big point through a thread of a lot of these, is the more that you can understand yourself, the more emotionally intelligent you are of where your weaknesses are and how you counteract them, where your strengths are, the better you're going to advance in your career and anything you decide to do in your life.
Yeah, thank you for speaking to that, because I think that's a very important piece to know, especially for young professionals that are just starting their corporate careers, right? And then kind of in that same line, but a different element, what's one book or resource that changed your perspective on success?
There's lots of little things that come from many books, right? And, so I always say, like, keep trying to read. And if you don't like reading, do Audible. This is where I learn my stuff. I put Audible on when I'm in the car or in a train and just my, AirPods, etc. And And sometimes it's not a whole book, but sometimes there might be a phrase or a sentence or something within a book that just sends your whole life on a different trajectory. So I think to curiosity, seek that stuff out. But if I was going to name one book right now, there's a book by Daniel Priestley, and it's called Key Person of Influence. And I suppose it teaches, it's all about personal branding and how, if you can kind of, and again, it's to the same stuff we're talking, if you can figure out who you are, if you can figure out what you believe in, if you can stand for something and you can figure out your values and you can figure out where you add value to who, and then you can figure out how to amplify that, it's the biggest winner that you can get to your career. Because whether you're going to get a job, whether you're going to be a freelancer, whether you're going to try and create a business, the more influential you are, and we know that because we've got like influencer culture and content creator culture, the more successful you're going to be. And especially in a world now where we're going to end up with loads of AI slop all over the internet, right? Because there's going to be more content than ever. The way that you're going to be able to rise above that is knowing who you are, having something to stand for, and being able to articulate it and tell stories in a way that other people can't. So, yeah, I think that book is a real good investment. And a second one, if I can add one in, is Simon Sinek, and it starts with why. It's an old book now, and Simon Sinek, if you've not got money for the book and you've not got time, just go and watch his TED Talk. It's about finding your purpose in life. It's about finding the reason you get out of bed beyond money. And I think if you can nail your why, if you can nail what you do and how you do it, and then if you can sort of hone how to build a personal brand around that, it's going to return you so much. So that the sooner you can figure that out as early as possible in your career, the biggest advantage it's going to give you.
It is, right? A lot of people, at times people say, if you want to hide a secret, put it in a book. Because a lot of people don't pick up books, right? A lot of people just want to, our previous point, consume video content. And sometimes that is not brought across as detailed as it can be in a book. So I always highly recommend, reading books. And I, in the past, was not an advocate for reading books. Like, it was just hard for me to get involved. And there was just something that, it clicked in my head a few months ago. And now I've just been unstoppable with wanting to consume books. And I'm not even sure if it's because of this podcast, right? Because I get so many great books from individuals that I'm like, I want to read and know what they know, and kind of go and digest that. But to relate to your point about curiosity, now within our corporate careers or, founding businesses, there's always skills that one has to learn or pick up over time. If you could pick only one skill to master in your 20s, what would it be?
Storytelling.
Ooh, impactful.
Yeah. I think it's back to where we started again. It's like figure out how to communicate and storytell. And I'm sure there'll be some people listening to this and it will be the hardest thing for them because not everyone is comfortable doing what we're doing right now, talking on screen. But if it gives anyone any sort of hope, is I was terrible at doing what I'm doing now back then as well. And it was only through throwing myself onto a stage and trying to articulate a story and then doing it again and doing it again and doing it again that I started to figure out what that was. And then very much like a comedian hones their act, I always feel that most humans have a series of stories, and we don't have a great. We've got a certain amount of go-to stories, and you'll know yourself if you're at a party or you're meeting new people. You've probably got about 5 or 6 go-to stories that that one lands quite well. It always gets a smile. It gets me, and I think if you can use that to start to shape what are the 5 I've got, and then can I make them better? Can I improve them? And then just every time you're networking, and I say that with, inverted commas, right? When you're talking to humans, keep trying to make them better. Try and make your stories more engaging. When someone tells you one that makes you smile, think about, why did I smile at it? What did they do to me that made it enjoyable? And the better you can get at doing that, the more chance you're going to have to attract people, to engage people, and to move yourself into a world. Because I think ultimately the people who own the stories run the world, right? It's the people that have the loudest stories, the ones that tell them the best are the ones that people follow. So figuring out how to do that is a really valuable skill set.
I mean, there's a reason why it's, the number one public fear in the world when it comes to public speaking. But I think to your point, it's just start small, right? It doesn't have to be this large scale thing. Start small, practice those important, right? Even with family members, yourself in the mirror, like get comfortable with talking to yourself in a mirror because it's weird and it's uncomfortable looking at yourself, but it does help, right? And then to your point, you become comfortable over time when you refine that message because even the pronunciation becomes clearer. You can slow down. You know exactly what you're going to do. Because I think they say when you go to public speak, practice. At least if you, it's sort of, understand and know the intro and your outro, and then everything in between, trust the process. And I think that's just even with sort of telling your story, networking, it's, have that confidence on that entry point, at least where you understand your story, you'll build that confidence, but be present. I think a lot of us are not present in that moment, even though we're physically there. We're not necessarily focusing on the human cues, the body language, which is 80% of communication, right? To kind of get those cues of what's working, what's not working. So I appreciate you diving into that because that's extremely fascinating. And then how do you stay motivated when things go sideways?
If I had the answer to this, I think it's tough. And I think I'm going to give a bit of empathy out to everyone is that if you're listening and things are tough for you, know that it's tough for everyone. And I think that's the hard part about social media, the hard part about LinkedIn, the hard part about all of the people that you see that you feel are successful is that it looks like none of it's going sideways, but the reality is it's constantly going sideways. And when I've ever spoken to anyone that's successful, and successful is of course subjective to anyone, the people that tend to succeed and make things grow or happen is resilience and just knowing that you have to just keep getting up and you have to do it longer than the next person and more consistently. And there's been loads of times in my journey where as a business it's so hard, I have tears in my eyes, not want to get out of my bed. And, often people think, that, entrepreneurship and running a business, you've got all this freedom, but you actually sometimes build yourself a pretty prison, right? Because when someone's employed or someone has a job, if they're unhappy, they can leave that job and they can go and do something, they can find changes. And so, when you grow a business or something, you're sometimes locked in it. And I don't mean that play a little violin for me, but I'm trying to, I suppose, let people know that, it goes sideways for a lot of people a lot of the time. A lot of people are good at masking it. So just know that you're not the only one.
It's almost to that element of perception is reality, right? The way they perceive somebody online, they assume that that's the reality they must live, when in actual fact, let's raise the curtains and actually see what's behind, right? And to your point, sometimes it is tough. It's miserable. It's hard. But I appreciate you just setting that playing field because yeah, I think a lot of the younger generation look to those to where they want to go and think it's absolutely perfect, but it's not. You've struggled, in multiple different ways just to get to where we are. And then you've built a really profound like personal brand and you've gained confidence over time with public speaking, et cetera. You have obviously a successful TikTok channel, which is incredible as well. But like, what's the easiest way to stand out in a crowded marketplace for someone?
Well, I think when you start to realize that personal brand is just you being you, it's very empowering, right? And most people, when they set off to create a personal brand, they try to be someone else. They try to be someone that they admire. And it doesn't work because they run out of energy and they can't create the same content as that person. And their version is not as good. And I think it's really empowering when you realize I just need to be me and I need to figure out again what makes me great, what I have as my strengths. And a way to do that, to try and give a sort of actionable way to do it, is try and figure out what you want to be known and famed for, right? So if it's not come across by now, I'm a creative person, I'm a creative soul, and everything emitting from my heart is creativity. my kryptonite is structure and organization, and I very much need those people around me. But I can ideate, I can create vision, ideas, and I can see spaces in between things that maybe others can't. So I know that, and that's my place in earth where I can maybe pass value to other people. So if you can nail what your give is, and then we all have behaviors, or sorry, we all have beliefs, right? Yours will vary from mine, Wade, and if we get on, it's usually because they align in some way or another, and we believe in similar things, and we call these values in a branding sense, right? And most people have 3 or 4 or 5 guiding values that guide them in life in terms of these are behaviors that they do, and some people might believe in loyalty, or they might believe in bravery, or they might believe in this or that. And if you can figure out these things, so figure out your kind of guiding purpose, figure out what you give in terms of a proposition to the world and where you pass value, figure out your values, write them on a post-it note, stick them on the wall beside your computer screen. And then if you think about personal brand, when you turn up to Andrew Dobby on LinkedIn or Instagram, or it's like turning up to a TV channel, right? When I turn on MTV, I'm expecting value. I'm expecting, music. I'm expecting a certain type of content. And so if you want people to click that follow button and engage and share and engage in you need to almost consistently turn up with something that they're going to remember. Now, that doesn't mean you only have to do one thing, and humans have a varying amount of interests and things, but you need to try and narrow them, right? So with me, you're going to hear about branding and creativity because my career is built on it and it's my passion. And the more I talk about that, the better I get at it. I'm also going to talk about leadership because I want to be a good leader in my company, and I want to learn more about leadership. And so the more I talk about it, it forces me to think about what is good leadership and how do I do it. So that's a pillar for me. I then want to talk about culture because I really believe the best brands and businesses are built from the inside out. So culture is a thing that I would like to be famed for when companies want to improve theirs through branding, but I also want to understand it really well. But then I've got a family, so entertaining dad, which is my TikTok with my son Finn. I'll talk about that, and I'll talk about Finn because that makes my heart sing, and I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I think that's pretty much where I play, right? And so it's not that I'm not interested in other things and everything else, but if I talk about everything and everything, I'm nothing to no one. Whereas if I stay in those 4 lanes, you understand that you're going to learn about branding and creativity, you're going to learn about leadership, culture, and you're going to see a little bit into my family and what makes me tick and whether you like me or not. And those are, and then really I've just taken the real truthful me and I've put it into a scalable version online.
Yes, exactly. No, it's just so incredible because that's the part of personal branding that people forget. It's personal, right? A lot of people are like, I got to fit into this box of being someone that they see online, but that's that person's world, right? And they're living to their truth. And I think there's, let me see here. I believe it is, yes, Courtney Johnson. She's on like LinkedIn and TikTok as well. But I think one point that she brings up is very clutch in this sense is, she states that like she doesn't like niches because that puts people into one of those boxes versus you are your own niche, right? And you touched on it a little bit too, just in a different way, where identify your values. Those are the areas you like to talk about. You are your niche. A niche doesn't mean that you have to focus on one thing. You mentioned, 3, 4, 5, like that's okay. People like a variety because they get to see the inside of who you are. And then ultimately your tribe will grow over time and you'll grow your brand and your presence, but you're being personal and vulnerable. Like if you just spoke about branding the whole time, that's amazing. It's one thing, but you involving your son and then leadership, I mean, it just gives more of an enrichment into who you are. And that's where I think you get that really sort of the devout followers in a way, right? That really want to grasp onto what you're saying because they get to know you as a person in this sort of connected, disconnected world that we currently live in today. So I appreciate you running through that. And then You know, a lot of times college students or young graduates get caught up in just busy work, right? So, like, what's the biggest time waster young professionals that? What's the biggest time waster that young professionals should eliminate right now?
I love the term busy work. It's one that I only really learned that term recently, and I thought that's a great description for stuff we shouldn't be on, right? It's like, and I think what it is too many people wait on for perfection rather than just get going, rather than good enough to get going. And I've not articulated that well, but like so many people plan and plan and plan, and I'm going to do this and I'm going to create that and I'm going to be, and they don't just get started. And I'm a big believer, just put stuff out, just get going. And if you're thinking, how do I do that though? You could, right? If you're sitting listening to this and thinking, I don't have this personal brand and I don't know how to get going, and what's the first step? The first step might be going on to LinkedIn or Instagram or wherever and saying, I don't know the first step, but here I am. My name is Andrew, and I've kind of got a vision that I want to be this in life or that in life, but I don't quite know. But I'm putting this video out or I'm writing this post because I need to get started. And if I don't get started, it will never happen. So here's my first post. And I'm hoping by putting this out into the world, something's come back to me and something might change. And you know what? See if 5 people like that. That's 5 people that now know that. And that holds you accountable. And we often go, but that's only 5 likes. Imagine you stood in a room with 5 people. 5 people is quite a lot of people. And then if you stood in a room with 20 people, that's quite a lot of people as well. So you don't need 1,000 people to love this thing. It's better to have 100 people that love a brand and a person and a story than 1,000 people that like it. So just get going, get going, get going, get going.
I think people focus on virality when it comes to being on social, but even one like, if you change one person's perspective, to our earlier point, if they can view this podcast or read a book and that one little phrase changes their life, you've succeeded in this life to a certain degree, right? And I think that that's a really powerful thing to remember. There's a lot of things that can also go on in our daily lives, right? Especially as founders or people that run podcasts, et cetera. But if there's one daily action that guarantees progress, what is that?
Make sure you get downtime. You know, I think too much of what you see online or what you think success is that you have to get up and have an ice bath and write down something on a piece of paper and then go and do this and then go and do that, then go and do this, then do a full day's work and then run a marathon. And you don't. You don't need to do a lot of those things. A lot of those good things are very good for you. But I think whatever your thing is, and if your downtime is playing Fortnite, playing Roblox, play whatever, do your downtime thing and find space for that, and find space for a weekend and a holiday and all the things that entrepreneur hustle culture says you shouldn't probably be doing. Do it, because without the time for your brain and head to kind of stop working and give you subconscious, you'll end up burning out and you don't get anything else done. So don't feel guilty about that stuff. And one thing I put on LinkedIn that always seems to resonate, and I share it quite a lot, and that's another tip, by the way, is when you get good content and stuff that resonates, share it multiple times, because it lasts. Not everyone sees it and everyone forgets that. Is that I stopped reading emails after 6 o'clock at night. And it's not because I don't care, and it's not because I don't want to, it's that I realized that if I read an email after 6 o'clock at night, inevitably something bad comes into your email, right? If you run a company, someone's handed their notice in, or a contract has been cancelled. And what happens then is you can't do anything about it because work hours are closed and everyone's not there, but it's in your brain, and you're now not talking to your family, your kids, your whoever. You're now locked in to a negative cycle. You're not sleeping. You can't do anything. Whereas if you had just not read that email and you read it at 5 to 9 in the morning, at 9 o'clock in the morning, you can go into action. And I know that's not right for everyone's jobs and everyone's business is different, but take a lesson from that in some way that works for your own life, is find a boundary that you close off only for you and your headspace.
There is a lot of it this day and age with that hustle culture. You got to wake up at 4 a.m., 5 a.m., do this, do that, meditate, cold plunge, ice bath, like all the different stuff. And it's, if that works for somebody, then absolutely. go for it and do it, right? If that optimizes your life. But I appreciate you touching on if you need to play Fortnite or you need to hang out with your kids or go for a run, find what brings you joy, right? Because that in turn is going to refill up your cup. It'll inspire you to keep going. And then, yeah, I mean, if there's ways to, sort of habit stack, like people say, as you run, listen to a podcast or audio book, I think it's a good way to leverage that use of time. But even then, if you just want to run and you want to clear your mind and you don't want anything, that's amazing as well. Well, Andrew, thank you so much for spending your time with us. It's been very exceptional.
Thank you for having me, Wade. It's been enjoyable.